Can I tell you a secret? I feel like people don't talk about it enough, but you can actually have a functional bullet journal that still looks nice. You can use stickers and washi tape and fun lettering and still end up with a journal that is functional and helps you get things done. That is exactly what we're doing in this video, and if we haven't met before, hi, I'm Jess. I've been bullet journaling since the end of 2016, and I believe that you can have a decorated bullet journal that's still functional. In fact, if my journal doesn't look nice, oftentimes it isn't very functional. I find that I don't use my journal if I don't like the way it looks. So to make sure that my journal is functional, to make sure that I'm actually getting in and making use of it, I do need to make it look a little bit decorative. Now, a functional journal is going to look a little bit different for each individual person, but this is really about identifying the purpose that you want your journal to serve. The way that I like to do that is ask myself a series of 4 questions. So what kind of things in my last journal did I like or did work? Which kind of things didn't I like or didn't work? What needs do I foresee for this new journal? So in this case, in the next 6 months, what kind of needs do I think I'll have? And then is there anything in this new journal that I want to try? The setup that we're doing here today is what came out of those questions. And one of the things I decided that I didn't need was this first dot grid page. Sometimes I'll put in a quote or maybe a year at a glance, but this time around I figured I'd just double-sided tape it to the card on the left-hand side and effectively just pretend that the page doesn't exist. This way, when I open up the front of my journal, I'm just going to be greeted by that first dot grid spread, which is where I'm going to be putting my year at a glance and my future log. If we're thinking about the needs for my journal in particular, I like to use this one on a day-to-day basis to help me get organized, get things done, effectively just tackle everything that life throws at me. If you're like me, then I know how busy you are, and having a place to jot down all of the tasks, events, happenings, everything else, that is what this journal is for. When it comes to the things that I have going on for work in particular, a lot of those are time-based, or they have specific dates that they have to be done by or done on. Having a year-at-a-glance calendar at the start of my journal can be really helpful, just as a reference to turn back to whenever I need to look up a specific day that a date is going to fall on. Rather than write out all of the little numbers myself, I opted to use printables for this one. These are free printables, which you can find linked in the description box below, but effectively I just printed these ones out on sticker paper, then cut them to size, and went to stick them on this black piece of card. Originally the intention was for the black piece of card to take up the entire of the page, but then I stuck the stickers down in the wrong place, so I kinda had to change track. I was intending on having a bit more space between each of the calendars so that I could have a header for each of the months and a space to write in the initials for each day of the week. And while I did still end up doing that, I had to make my titles for each of the months just a little bit smaller so that I could fit everything in. When it came to cutting out the stickers, I didn't use a sticker machine, I just cut them out by hand, but this also meant that I wasn't necessarily as accurate around the grid lines that I'd given myself, so I did have to go and color in a little bit of white space that was left over. It was a little bit tedious, but I very much prefer having it so that the only white on this black piece of paper is the part inside of the calendar boxes rather than anything outside of the grid lines. Once I'd done the colouring in though, then it was time to figure out how I was actually going to tackle the problem of not really having enough space for the headers and for the initials for each day of the week. I also hadn't really thought ahead of time how I was going to put these in, considering I'm writing on black paper, and I don't really like to use gel pens because they're kind of my nemesis. I find that regardless of how long I wait for them to dry, they end up transferring, and while the contrast of white gel pen on blackout paper looks so damn good, the transfer that I seem to get every single time I use it just isn't worth it. I opted instead to use a gold pen, mainly because it kind of matched the colour palette that I was using in the rest of the setup, even though I didn't really end up using it anywhere else in the setup. This is usually something I try and avoid because to make my pages cohesive, I like to use the same materials over and over again, but I figured for this first page I would just make my piece. It was going to be a lot easier to write these letters in using that pen than trying to find a different solution. Now when it comes to a year at a glance, and in particular having this with a future log, oftentimes people don't necessarily like to have both. That's usually because on their future log they'll include mini calendars, so it kind of makes the year at a glance a little bit obsolete. I do typically like to use both, only because I don't often put mini calendars on my future log, at least not anymore, and I figured that having those pages right next to each other would be really helpful. So I have the reference of the calendar on the left hand side, and then a space to write out my future events on the right. You'll see that for the calendar, rather than starting in January and going through to December, I've still made this one 12 months, but I'm starting at July instead. And that's because the first month I'm going to be using this journal is in July, so it made more sense to me to have a future view from that month in particular. I wanted the little monthly headers to stand out well on the blackout paper, so I opted to write them on a craft notepad, cut them out and stick them in. Very fiddly work, but I love the way it looks. In terms of the general styling for the entire setup we're doing, it's very heavily reliant on the contrast between the blackout paper, the craft paper, and the white. And I feel like this is a style that I first of all haven't done in quite a while, and also haven't done to this level of decoration. I like to try new things though, so it was a fun experiment. In terms of the header for the page, I didn't want it to just say 2024 because half of the months on this calendar aren't in 2024, but it felt so weird writing 2025. I know we do still have over 6 months until that time is upon us, but even just writing it feels strange. Heck, pretty much on a weekly basis, I'm still accidentally writing 2023 in certain places. So 2025 just feels way too far away. In terms of the future log though, the style of this one is different to what I've done previously. Usually I like to have a space for each individual month and the events that are going to be happening within that, but I also find that I'm not very good at using my future log, so there's not a lot of point in me setting up a space for each month, when realistically I'm only going to fill it in with the events that I have when I first start out the journal, which usually means there are certain months that just get left barren. I decided instead to split this one up into quarters, so quarter 3, which is for July through to September, quarter 4, which is October through to December, and then any events that are going to fall outside of that range are just going to be put in the bottom section, which is called ETC or etc. I don't expect to have too many events in that space though, which is why I put some decoration in the corner, and the way I'll write events in this space is just by starting it off with a dot, one that I can check off once the event has been transferred or happened or whatnot, then following that up with the date that it's happening and a brief description of the event itself. I decided to title the page Coming Up rather than Future Log just because I liked the way it sounded, and the sticker that we have in the bottom corner was kind of the inspiration for the entire theme. I've linked any of the materials that I used in the setup in the description box below just in case you wanted to grab any for yourself. Even though they were from different sets and different sticker books, I love how cohesive they looked together, but on this next spread and the ones that follow it, we're going to be setting up some overview pages. These are effectively extended monthly calendars, so I can see at a glance when things are happening, in particular stuff that I'm not necessarily adding to the future log. The future log is very much reserved for one-off events, things that don't happen on a regular basis, whereas on these calendars, the 3 spreads of them that I have, this is where I'm going to be holding all events, regardless of whether they're one-offs or if they're regular occurrences. So for instance, the live streams that we have each week, I want to put those on here. Things like our team and community hangouts that we have on Discord, any meetings, any trips that I'm taking, anything else. This effectively gives me a bird's eye view of the rest of the year, so I can see when my available time is versus when I will not have available. Because I have 4 days on one side of the spread and only 3 on the other, this gave a perfect place to put in some extra decoration. So I went in and lined each of the pages with a strip of washi tape, well, a larger strip that I ripped in half. I really love the look of ripped washi tape. I think it just adds a little bit of visual interest, and it also means I don't need to be too precious when I'm cutting the washi tape. If I was trying to do this so that the edge of the washi tape was straight, it would be a lot more stressful than just ripping it up. Because I'm a sucker for contrast as well, I wanted to put in some black washi tape in here too, and this combination of the black grid and then the black little celestial elements, those 2 tapes I have tried to use on pretty much every spread in the entire setup. Again, that idea of things being cohesive because you're using repeated elements over and over. The white background outside of the calendar boxes looked a little bit bare, so I decided to put in a faint brown grid behind this. This one was just done by using the dot grid, so putting a horizontal and a vertical line every 1 centimeter. This was also another element that I could use in future pages in the setup, just to add a little bit of visual interest to the pages, make them look more full. The nice part about the lines being faint is that it doesn't really matter so much if they aren't perfectly straight, and also with them not being perfectly straight, it kind of matches the imperfect nature of the washi tape as well, and also the little headers that I'm putting in, which certainly were not perfectly cut. For these ones, rather than using a notepad and then having to use a glue stick to stick them all in, I opted to use craft grid washi tape because it was going to be a lot easier. This tape in particular has a paper finish, which means it's really easy to write on top of as well. compared to other types of washi tape. To make the overview layout as usable as possible, I did need to go and add numbers in each of the boxes. These numbers are for the days of the month, but I don't actually have any specific way to show which month they are for. I do know that roughly 2 months fits on each of these spreads though, so the first 2 are going to be mainly for July and August, then we'll have September, October, so on and so forth. I might go in and add some kind of visual cue at some point, but for now it's going to work just fine. After adding a little bit of decoration to the top right corner, because it wasn't looking quite full, then all 3 spreads were done. These ones definitely took the longest to set up in the entire setup, mainly because there's 3 separate spreads of grids that I had to draw, but I think they're going to be really useful for just getting that bird's eye view of everything that I have going on for the next 6 months. For this next layout, I opted to make myself some more little stickers, these ones being mini calendar grids so I didn't have to draw all the grid lines myself. While the background grid lines on the last spread, I didn't mind them being a little bit wobbly, these ones I effectively wanted them to be perfect, so I just made them in Microsoft Word, printed them on sticker paper, cut them out, and here we are sticking them in. Because they're on matte sticker paper, they're going to be nice and easy to write on top of, because the spread we're setting up here is my work schedule. It effectively shows me the deadlines or due dates, happening dates, for anything work related. This could be the perks for my memberships on both Patreon and YouTube. It could be video releases, podcast episodes, community hangouts, or it could be anything for epic goals. Now, if you're the kind of person who sets themselves the same goals time and time again, whether it be every year for your New Year's resolutions, or every month you think to yourself, this is going to be the month that I actually take action. This is going to be the month that those things that I've been saying I want to do are actually going to get done. And then you get maybe 2 days into it, maybe a week, and you completely fall off with it. Don't worry, I completely understand that situation. I was very much the same, setting myself these goals over and over again and just not having them get achieved. And it would lead me to this point of feeling like I was doing something wrong. Like, oh, I wasn't motivated enough, or I didn't want it enough. Maybe I just wasn't committed. But actually, it turns out that the system I was using to try and get my goals just was ineffective. It didn't take into account the fact like the amount of time I actually have available to work on goals. It didn't give me any kind of insight about the different types of goals, or offer any flexibility in terms of how I could tackle them. So I went hunting for a new goal system to help me make those things happen. And I couldn't really find one. So instead, what I did was make one. Epic Goals is a step-by-step system that we can use to tackle any type of goal. It guides you through the whole way from goal ideation to reflecting on your goal progress in a series of bite-sized and actionable lessons. This is the goal setting system that I've used to do things like changing my career, decluttering my house, building an online community, and a bunch of other things. If you wanted to check out the Epic Goals course, it is now available for signups. Check the link in the description box for how you can gain lifetime access to the course and resources so that you can make epic things happen. If you've been here a while, you'll know that I am a sucker for a rainbow, so that is exactly what we are making here to color code my membership perks in particular. The purpose of these calendars really is to know when those perks are being released, so that I know when I need to organize them and get them ready for release. So I wanted to have a different color for each of the perks in particular. When it comes to the other sections that we have on this page, so YouTube, Discord, Epic Goals, and so on, those ones are all going to be done in gray, but with a little icon that indicates the type of activity that I'm putting onto the mini calendar. For instance, a YouTube video is going to have a little play button, a podcast episode is going to be a little microphone doodle, our book club meetings are going to be a little speech bubble, but as the main purpose was really for the membership perks, I wanted those ones to stand out, so they're going to be in color. As promised, I needed to add a little bit of washi tape on this spread so that it matched the other ones we have in the setup, but once I'd gone and added all of the information into the layout, I felt like the background was still looking a little bare. This is where I decided to make use of that background line work again, so just using the bullet end of Tombow 942 to put in that grid. I made sure not to go over any of the writing, mainly not to obstruct it, and also because I was using a pen that was not waterproof. If I went over with a Tombow marker, which is a water-based pen, I would certainly smudge all of the ink, which isn't really that attractive, at least when you're not meaning for it to happen. Things were going very well with the grid until I got to the bottom right hand corner of the spread. Here I accidentally put some of the lines one dot grid box off, so I ended up with a doubling up of the line, but this was also done around the decoration I'd already put in with the little lantern, so it's not super noticeable. I decided not to go in and fix it, mainly because sometimes when we try and fix a mistake in our journal, we actually end up drawing more attention to it. This was certainly going to be one of those cases because the grid work is really faint. If it bothers me too much, I'll just go in and double up on the grid, so put it on every single line rather than every second line, but for now, I'm not too fussed. Flipping over though and setting up another functional spread, this one is going to be for memberships and for my email newsletter. When it comes to my membership perks, what I would typically do is set up an individual layout every single month to keep track of all of the tasks that I need to do for the membership perks to make sure that they come out in a timely manner. Now, in thinking about making this setup as functional as possible for myself, I was really considering what kind of redundancy I have in my setups. What kind of things do I set up time and time again, which realistically could be combined into just a single layout that I set up at the start of my journal. This was very much one of those. Rather than listing out all of the tasks for my memberships each month individually, I decided to put them combined together at the start of the journal on this layout. Here I've split the page into 2 columns, so I'm going to have 3 months per column, and then as part of the structure of those columns, you can also see I've got some vertical highlighted lines. Effectively, I'm setting up these checklists using the Alistair method, or having a column for each of the different tasks that I need to do in preparing a membership perk. So each column represents a stage of having completed the perk, and then each row is an individual perk itself. On here, I decided only to include the perks that I don't already have materials fully prepared for, in part so I could fit everything in, but also to help me avoid wasting time writing down things that I've actually already completed. While I am totally the kind of person who writes something down on their checklist that they've already done just to get the satisfaction of checking it off, I wanted this list to only hold the things that I still need to work on, really so it gives me an accurate representation of how much work I have remaining to do. Rather than continuing with my perk list into the second column, I decided to take pause and add some decoration to the page, mainly because writing out all of these individual perks was making my hand cramp just a little bit. I know it's going to be useful having them all at the front of the journal, but writing them all at once is a little bit more of a task than writing them each month individually. I also think that the nice part about having them all in one layout at the start of the journal means that I can really actively try to get ahead on my perk work. If I only have the perks listed out for a month in the month that I'm working on, it's kind of like putting blinders on. I'm only focusing on those perks in that month, which means when I get to the next month, it's like starting again from scratch. By having them on this layout together, it means that I can kind of plan ahead, see where I can maybe batch tasks, work on things at the same time as each other, really to just streamline my process a bit. In terms of the decorative elements on this page, there wasn't really all that much space to put in decoration, so really it's just the header at the top using the blackout paper, and then also this strip of what I'm gonna call washi tape. It's technically a sticker going down the right hand side. This one came from a sticker book, which is linked in the description box below, which had a lot of these kind of dark academia vibes. I always kind of avoid saying dark academia because I feel like I don't really have a good understanding of what that type of style is, but somebody else told me that these layouts look like they're dark academia, so I'm just gonna roll with it. If you were to give this theme a name, what would you call it? Having seen what you've seen so far. To make my membership perk page just a little bit easier to use, I decided to put a dividing line between each of the perk sets for individual months. It just gives me a visual cue to show the separation between the perks for one month versus the next, so on and so forth. And it also helps make the list a little bit more readable. Normally when I do these styles of lists that have the columns, I'll often consider putting in horizontal lines as well so that I can very easily see which, in this case perk, lines up with which column, but in trying to keep things cohesive and not having horizontal lines like that on any other page, I decided just to put the columns in this time. As for the email page that we have on the right hand side, this is for my email newsletter. That one is a weekly email from me with an actionable idea to help you be more productive or creative or just bring some more intentionalism into your life. The information that I'm recording for that one is the date that the email's going out, the topic of the email, and then for each of the columns I have things like idea generation, drafting the email, scheduling it to post, all of that kind of thing. If you wanted to sign up for emails from me, there's also a link to that one in the description box too. Keeping on the train of consolidating layouts that I set up each month into one overall layout, on this layout I'm setting up a space to keep track of all of the videos that I have coming up for the rest of the year. This again would normally be one that I set up on a month-by-month basis, but it doesn't give me the ability to look forward and kind of consider how I might prepare for videos that aren't coming up in the month that I'm working on. Again, that idea of putting blinders on anytime I set things up on a month-by-month basis rather than an overall kind of basis. In this one, I'm again utilizing the Alistair method, so having columns to represent different tasks that I have to do for each individual video. On this one, each column will be one of those tasks, and each row is going to be the video in question. When it comes to video production, or the videos that I put out on this channel, the tasks that I have to do include things like figuring out what the topic of the video is going to be, organizing a title and thumbnail, actually recording the video and editing the footage, you know, taking out all of the boring stuff like me erasing pencil marks, and then also preparing the video for upload, so making sure it has all of the information in the description that it needs, making sure that it's scheduled to come out at the right time, any of that kind of stuff. This spread is where I'm going to be summarizing all of those, and I'm hoping that it'll again help me streamline my process, so giving me the opportunity to work ahead on my video content so I don't feel like I'm scrambling to get a video out at any given week. So far this year I really took a step back from putting out video content while I was working on the Epic Goals course, but now as that one is being released, I'm gonna have hopefully more time to produce more videos, so I am planning to go back to my more regular posting schedule of 2 videos per week, along with our live stream, so I guess technically 3 videos per week. With that said, if you've been enjoying this video and you want to see more like it, then be sure that you're subscribed to the channel so that you don't miss out. We have a bunch of really cool videos coming out next month in particular, with regards to things like B5 journal layout ideas, meal planning layouts, cleaning spreads, a bunch of stuff. I don't want you to miss out, so make sure that you're subscribed. Now, notably, a lot of the layouts we've had in this video so far are very much related to me being a YouTuber / content creator, which first of all kind of makes sense because we want our journals to work for us, and this is the kind of work that I need to organize. But if you were looking to recreate any of these layouts and thinking about how can I actually make them work for me, the majority of these come down to a series of projects that have the same kind of steps. So for instance, if you're a teacher and you're planning lessons, then you can use these layouts for doing that, considering the different stages of your lesson planning, so figuring out learning objectives, preparing materials, booking resources, whatever it may be. If you have more of an office job, then you can do a similar type of thing for things like report writing, emails, whatever else. Essentially, the majority of these layouts just work really well for a series of tasks or projects that you can break down into smaller steps, where it's the same set of steps over and over. You can also tweak or change these layouts so they're good for different types of activities done time and time again though. So maybe if you have a bunch of tasks that you have to do weekly, you can list out all of those tasks, and then each of the columns can be the individual weeks. If we're thinking about an example that kind of fits with that, we've got the page here on the left. This is for the Planner Pals podcast. So for this one, I've listed out all of the steps in making a podcast episode down the left, and then each of the columns is the podcast episode. We release the podcast every 2 weeks, so you can kind of think of this as a bi-weekly task list or fortnightly, with the left holding the series of steps that I have to do every 2 weeks. Essentially, in looking at the layouts that I've set up in this video, even if you're not a content creator, YouTuber, you can still use the structure of the layout, you just have to change the content that's held within it. This is the mindset that I try to get into anytime I'm watching Plan With Me videos, so considering the structure of the layout that the creator has used, where have they put the title, where are they putting the decoration, how have they split up the page, and then how could I tweak that or change it so that I could use it for something I need to organize. Notably, a lot of the time when I'm setting up these tables for each of my different lists that are themed around different parts of my work, rather than writing out a label for each of the columns, I'm using a little picture or icon to represent what it means. Now, I've been using pretty much the same set of icons repeatedly for the past I don't know how many years, so I have a very good idea of what each of those mean or represent. But if you were doing this for yourself, you can always write in a small label that goes vertically up the page, or you could include a key somewhere on the page to show what they represent. I like to make it kind of intuitive, a little bit obvious, so for instance, if I need to write something, I'll put in a pencil. If I'm filming something, I'll put in a little kind of, movie film camera. If I need to post it somewhere online, in particular a social media platform, then I'll use the icon for that platform in particular as well. I like to use the icons, one, because they're a little bit cute, and two, because they don't take up as much space as writing out the words that I'd need to use in order to label each of those columns. This means that in my journal I have space for things like a header, decoration, anything else I want to include. And speaking of decoration, I had some blank space on the bottom of that left-hand page, so I decided to stick in a quote that I had on some PET tape that I had. This isn't necessarily the quote that I would have chosen for myself if I were just going to pick one out of thin air, but because the PET tape has the transparent backing, it means that the text shows up the same on both the white paper of the journal and also on the washi tape that I stuck along the bottom. Don't read too much into the quote that I've picked here, it's literally just because I liked the lettering style and it was going to fit the space, and it wasn't going to be as strange or unsuitable as some of the others on the tape. That one has a collection of different Shakespeare quotes from a range of different pieces of his. But onto this layout now. Here we have one that isn't related to my work, but what I'm calling a leisure dashboard. Essentially the spread just has different sections related to different leisure things. So on the left we have a space for 25 things that I want to do before 2025. I'm taking these items from a list of 101 things that I want to do this year, so picking out my 25 favorites that I really want to focus on before the year is over. And then on the right hand page we have a couple different sections, the top one of which is an intentional leisure ideas space. Oftentimes when it comes to my leisure time, I don't really have anything specific that I want to do, so I usually just default to very low energy, not cup filling tasks. For instance, scrolling social media in such a way that isn't really restorative. This is not me trying to hate on scrolling social media because, I often do it as a way to just kind of turn my brain off, relax for a bit. But when it comes to leisure time that I really want to get in and do those things that I know are really enjoyable, really fill my cup, I thought that having a list of those things might be helpful in making sure that I actually do some of them. For instance, playing a whole bunch of Xbox games that I keep saying that I want to try, reading books that I keep saying that I want to read. There are things that I like to do for my leisure that aren't just scrolling social media, so if I have leisure time in my schedule, I want to be intentional about how I use that. The section underneath this one though is for my date plans with my partner Vogel, so recording the dates that we want to take with each other and the dates that we do end up taking, whether they be date nights, date days, little outings, anything like that. And then the space at the bottom is going to be things that I want to explore. These could be skills that I want to learn, things that I want to check out, anything that kind of fits into that space. Oftentimes when I find something that I want to investigate or explore further, it isn't really the opportune moment to do that, so I figured that having a space where I can jot them down and come back to later could be useful. Outside of those sections though, this is where we have the decorative elements. So that's the header at the top, which we're doing with the blackout paper again, and also a couple of pieces of decoration at the bottom too. This was an opportunity to use more stickers, washi tape, layering. I've really enjoyed this kind of more scrapbooky style recently, and also because I've been a little bit less inclined to do a lot of drawing in my journal, it's been a nice way to still have the decorative element that I really need, because remember, I'm not going to use my journal if I don't like the look of it, but I don't have to spend a whole heap of time doing them. When it comes to populating the sections that I have on this layout, in terms of the left-hand page where that 25 before 2025 is going to go, I've already got a checkbox to check off when the thing happens and the number of the task. Next to that though, I'm going to be writing out what the task is, and then I'm also going to record the date that it got completed along the right-hand side. As for date plans, I'm going to jot down some of the ideas that Vogel and I have for our date days or date nights, and then as they happen, I can check those off. And the things to explore, I'm just going to write in a simple description of whatever it is that I want to check out. I really like these dashboard layouts for being kind of like a one-stop shop for any area of your life. Obviously, I have this one set up as a leisure dashboard, but you can also do similar things for work-related tasks, household projects. If you need to have like a home cleaning dashboard, that's an idea for one. Effectively, any project or area that you can break up into smaller sections and then have this kind of modular layout where you can see all of those things at once. At this point though, because I had been using this decorative style on all of the pages of the setup, I realized that my front cover didn't really match, so I wanted to flip back to that, add a couple of elements of decoration, and also switch out that blue post-it note for one that was a bit more in theme. This is certainly not necessary, I just thought it would be nice if it matched. I'm a sucker for a cohesive setup, so I wanted to include that here. And it also gave me an opportunity to use more of my decorative stickers, which I'm probably not going to get around to using for quite a while, considering I don't tend to use the same style or theme with each subsequent setup. Having a flip through of the layouts that we set up in this video though, I am so chuffed with how these came together. I really loved the contrast between the blackout paper, the white and the craft elements, and also just playing around with the kind of more scrapbooky style with the stickers, even if I don't necessarily know what the theme is called. I know that this setup is going to be super functional for me, but I love that it's still decorative because now I'm going to be a lot more inclined to actually use it. If you were on the hunt for more bullet journal inspiration though, in particular new journal setups, then this playlist has every new journal setup that I've done on this channel. Each of those setups is a little bit different in terms of the style or theme that I use, but they're all focused around the idea of marrying the functionality with the form or the creative elements. Those ones are worth checking out next though, so click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.